Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back. Today on Milanese Math, we're going to be taking a look at bar graphs. And if you want to follow along with the worksheet that we're using, you can find it at the first link in the description below. Okay, so we see bar graphs all the time. If you're watching TV, if you're scrolling social media, especially around, it seems like, political season, you're always going to see lots of bar graphs. And the reason is because bar graphs are good for displaying data that are in categories. Okay, so let's fill that in. So it's good for showing things that are in different categories. And so what I always tell my students is if you get a graph like this, before you start trying to answer any questions, just make sure that you are familiar with the graph. So the first thing is look for the title of it. This one is pretty generic. It just says population, okay? Then I'm gonna look at my X and Y axis and find out what it's reporting. So I can see on the X axis that it is the country, and on the Y axis, it's the population of those countries in millions, okay? And so I see that they've got France, the UK, Mexico, Nigeria, and Pakistan. And then I noticed that for each one of those categories, there's 3 different bars. And I can use the key at the top to see that that's referencing 3 different years at 1980, 1990, and 2000. So now that you kind of are familiar with the graph and you know what it's talking about, go ahead and start taking these questions one at a time. So again, I'm gonna probably leave this on the screen for the majority of it, but if you wanna see some of the questions that I'm talking about out loud, again, it's the first link in the description below. You can download it for yourself. But number 1 says, what was the population of Mexico in 2000? So immediately my brain is going right here to Mexico. And then I'm trying to pay attention to what year they're talking about, 2000. Well, that's this green bar, and it goes all the way up to right there, which if I trace that over, looks like it's at 80. And remember that that is in millions. So there would be about 80 million people there. So the answer is 80 million. Cool. It's that simple, okay? All right, let's take another one. What was the population growth of the United Kingdom from 1980 to 2000? Okay, so first of all, my brain is saying, okay, United Kingdom. So I'm gonna I'm gonna narrow it down to this column. And they wanna go from 1980 to 2000. Well, 1980 is the blue bar. And so that looks like right there. So I'm just gonna jot these numbers down. That's 50 million. And then in 2000, it goes all the way up to here. I'm not exactly on one of the lines, so you have to kind of estimate. To me, that's somewhere between 60 and 65. I'm gonna call it 63, just as an estimation. So I know that this went from 50 to 63. So to answer their question, what was the population growth? Well, if it went from 50 million to 63 million, that would be a growth of 13 million. Okay. All right, let's take a look at number 3. Which country had the least growth from 1980 to 1990? Okay, so stop and make sure you understand like what you're looking for. There's a difference between 1980, which are all of the blue bars, and 1990, which are all of the red bars. And if I'm looking for the country that had the least growth, I would want the ones that are closest together. So if I look at France, I mean, those are almost spot on with each other. I'm talking about this part and this part. I mean, they are very, very close together. If I bump over the United Kingdom, that gap is bigger. Mexico had a huge gap between 1980 and 1990. Nigeria had a huge gap between 1980 and 1990. And Pakistan had a pretty big gap as well. So I think for sure the country that had the smallest growth, in other words, they were closest together, would have been France. So the answer to number 3 is France. So then number 4, it said, which country had the biggest population in 1980? Okay, well, how would you answer that one? Well, 1980 is the blue bars, right? If you're looking at that. And it's just asking which one had the most in 1980. So if we compare all of the blue bars, I think this one right here is the highest of the blue bars, and that's Mexico. Okay, so which country had the biggest population? That would be Mexico. Then they could get really fancy with a question like number 5. It says, by what % did Nigeria's population increase from 1980 to 2000? Oh boy. Well, if you watched our last video, which was just a kind of like a catch-all introduction to percentages, the way we calculate a percent increase or decrease is like this. You take the difference between the two numbers, you divide it by the original, whatever the original number was, and then you multiply that by 100 to get it to come out as a percentage. So let's see if we can do this. What is the difference between 1980 and 2000 when we're talking about, where was it, Nigeria? Yeah, okay. So 1980 to 2000, so 1980 was 60. And let's see, 2000, this is somewhere right in between 80 and 90. I'll call that 85. Okay, so basically it went from 60 to 85. So 85 subtract 60. And then we need to divide that by whatever the original population was. So in 1980, that number, remember, was 60. Okay, and then the formula also calls for us to multiply by 100. So let's just evaluate that. 85 subtract 60 is 25. Okay, and so you can grab a calculator or however you want to solve this, but when you take 25 divided by 60 and then multiply it by 100, that is 42%. In other words, in those 20 years, in just 2 decades, Nigeria's population increased 42%. That's a huge increase in population. Okay, so if you've downloaded the worksheet, you'll notice that there's a second page and it has a whole nother set of bar graphs and some questions to go along with it. So hopefully this video was helpful, and if it was, consider subscribing to the channel. And as always, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.